1st of December 2019, cases of pneumonia of an unknown type surfaced in the central Chinese province of Hubei. Li Wenliang, a Wuhan-based ophthalmologist, warns a group of doctors about a possible outbreak of an illness that looks remarkably like SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome. He is told by police to stop making false comments. At the end of December, the World Health Organization is told about the cases. During the first few days of January this year, the initial prognosis is limited to less than 50 people who have links to a seafood wholesale market in Wuhan, which is closed down. By 7th January, a new type of coronavirus is identified and isolated by the Chinese authorities, and China shares the generic sequence of the virus for countries to use in developing diagnostic kits. By 20th January, cases are confirmed through Thailand, Japan, South Korea, and then Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and the United States. Public transport is suspended in Wuhan, and people are instructed not to leave the city. On the 24th of January, New Zealand's own Ministry of Health sets up a team to look at the situation and assesses the current risk as low. On January 27th, the following day, 3 cases of the virus are confirmed in Australia, and public health staff begin meeting flights arriving from China to look for signs of the virus. The number of cases worldwide has risen now to just under 3,000, and almost 100 people have lost their lives. On 30th January, the New Zealand government charters an Air New Zealand flight to evacuate New Zealanders from Wuhan. The World Health Organization declares the outbreak to be a public health emergency of international concern. 1 week later, the 2nd of February, there are almost 15,000 confirmed cases of the virus, with over 300 lives lost. A joint statement is released by the World Health Organization and a China research team to say that the epidemic peaked and plateaued in China between the 23rd of January and the 2nd of February, and has been declining since. On the 3rd of February, the first entry restrictions are placed on foreign nationals arriving into the country from or transitioning through mainland China by the New Zealand government. Those who can enter the country must self-isolate for 14 days. On the 11th of February, the World Health Organization names the disease COVID-19, the coronavirus disease 2019. There are now over 43,000 confirmed cases of the infection and over 1,000 people have died. More than the total number of deaths during the SARS outbreak of 2002 to 2004. On 22nd February, Italy quarantines more than 50,000 people from 11 different municipalities in the north of the country. New Zealand reports its first case of COVID-19 on the 28th of February. Someone who has travelled into the country from Iran. The government places restrictions on people flying into the country from Iran. By the end of February, New Zealand health officials are meeting direct flights at the New Zealand airports arriving from Hong Kong, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and Thailand. We have our first rush of people buying toilet paper, hand sanitizer, and tin food. On 7th of March, the global number of COVID-19 cases passes through 100,000. Of which 5 are in New Zealand. The next day, more than 100 countries have reported cases of COVID-19, as Italy prepares to lock down 16 million people living in the northern municipality of Lombardy. 2 days later, Giuseppe Conte puts the entire country on lockdown. On March 11, the World Health Organization declares COVID-19 an official pandemic. On 16th of March, Jacinda Ardern declares that any tourist entering New Zealand must self-quarantine, and anyone failing to do so will be deported. Air New Zealand halts share trading and cuts services dramatically, as the Reserve Bank announces an emergency official cash rate cut. The total number of cases outside of China are now greater than within. Countries in Europe begin resurrecting borders between each other again, including Germany, France, Austria, and Switzerland. Markets around the world begin to go into a freefall. The New Zealand government announces a $12.1 billion package worth 4% of the country's GDP. It includes a $500 million boost for health, $8.7 billion in support of businesses and jobs, and $2.8 billion for income support and to boost consumer spending. And then, on the 19th of March, for the first time in New Zealand's history, the government closes the country's borders to all but New Zealand citizens and permanent residents. The following day, Auckland Council closes pools, libraries, galleries, and other community facilities for 14 days. Air New Zealand's shares plummet as it resumes trading after a 4-day halt. The number of confirmed cases worldwide is now above 200,000. It took 3 months to reach 100,000. And just 12 further days to double. By now, New Zealand has 52 cases of COVID-19 identified and, while not yet evidence, community transmission is not ruled out. On the 21st of March, the Prime Minister introduces a 4-level alert system and explains that we are already on level 2, which means the risk of the community transmission is growing. 2 days later, the country's 100th case of COVID-19 is recorded. The Prime Minister announces that the country has moved to level 3, effective immediately, and asserts that the country will move to level 4 within 48 hours. On 25th of March, the country moves to level 4. A state of emergency is declared. The entire country goes into lockdown for 4 weeks from midnight. People are instructed to stay at home. Schools and other educational facilities will close. all non-essential business will close. Travel will be severely limited and healthcare services will be reprioritized. Hundreds of phone calls from doctors, clinics and surgeries begin to postpone anything that was not critical. The only travel outside of essential business could only be in connection with supermarket or pharmacy shopping or attending a medical clinic. The total number of cases of COVID-19 are now almost at 300. We have a window of opportunity to stay home, break the chain of transmission and save lives, says Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. It's that simple. On 29th of March, New Zealand reports its first COVID-19 related death. The total number of cases in New Zealand is now approaching 650, although 74 people have recovered. In the UK, 10 days after being tested positive, the UK Prime Minister is hospitalised. Globally, the number of cases is now above 1 million, and more than 50,000 people have died. By 9th of April, the Health Minister reports the lowest number of new cases since the 23rd of March. And although the number rises the next day, it drops back to 29 new cases by 11th of April. By 14th of April, the global number of identified cases stands at 2 million. The world anticipates an economic and health impact that could persist for at least 2 generations. In New Zealand, we learn that 9 people have now lost their fight with the disease. And although over 600 people have recovered, we still have a similar number who have tested positive and yet to have assured outcome. The essence of being a New Zealander has always been of a person who is straightforward, fair-minded, and with a high regard for autonomy and individualism. Aotearoa has mostly rejected the idea of big government, with a conforming society preferring to live in an environment where we celebrate and protect diversity and celebrate the reality that all of our views do not align all of the time. There is no doubt that the current situation presents the world with some of the biggest challenges that many of us can remember. But I wonder if our response to the situation has become to compromise some of the fundamental values of our society and way of life. It took just 4 days from becoming aware of a new 4-step process that had been designed to guide us to respond to this new worldwide COVID-19 threat, to us all being locked down in our homes with the most restricting set of laws that we had implemented in the history of the country. It took just another 10 days to further impound on that freedom, making it a matter of criminal misdemeanor to swim, paddle, fish, hunt, or surf in the country. And it was all implemented with speedy efficiency and with zero interaction with the constituents of the country. Furthermore, other tools have been implemented that have not only enabled, but encouraged every single one of us to become an informer of any perceived misdemeanors that may contravene these very strict new laws. And to be clear, they are enforceable laws and not guidelines. This might make for an uncomfortable comparison, but these were the same kinds of conditions that existed in East Germany before 1989. The people were controlled by overwhelming and sometimes misleading messaging, and the need for a state of emergency that enabled the government to protect the general population from a great peril over a sustained period of time, years and years. 2 months ago, if a conversation around the informer network set up in some extreme communist state would have entered discussion, it would have sent a collective shudder down our spines. Now, in the famous words of "Listen Without Prejudice" by George Michael, what was over there is over here. And most people have embraced this as being a good idea. I wonder how many streets throughout the country will now forever have had the seeds of mistrust sown during this time, as suspicious neighbours' assertions have led to a police visit to check on a suspected contravention of the new laws. Laws which, incidentally, took over 5 days to clarify after being implemented. Laws which even our own government ministers either disregarded or did not understand sufficiently. Our Dobbin system is not in the spirit of New Zealanders. It is an instrument that has the potential to create ongoing compromise to our communities and way of life. Is COVID-19 a great peril? A great peril surely puts a significant proportion of the population at risk or threatens their way of life. COVID-19 is not extraordinary. There has been and will in the future be new viruses that threaten the most vulnerable. At this point, the death rate in New Zealand is modest, and it does not challenge our way of life, nor is it an invasion, World War I, or the Black Death. It is awful, but so is much of life. History screams at us that powers that are instituted at times of great crisis, once taken up, are rarely laid down again. The state of emergency was rushed through without any discussion in 5 days. It is arguably not needed, and it should be removed as soon as practicable. The real great peril is actually anything that threatens our way of life. Right now, that could be our own self-empowered central government that threatens our way of life, enabled by a hyper-bureaucratic techno-surveillance capability, such as that being implemented in places like Singapore and China. If we have a true state of emergency, then it should only curtail our inalienable rights as New Zealanders if our behaviour directly prevents us addressing the great peril. A sensible person walking in the bush, going for a surf, driving solo to the beach for a walk, Hunting in the outdoors does not qualify as someone preventing anything. Surely the state of emergency should not be something that forces blind conformance with no obvious link to sensible understanding or intellect. If, in the current environment, it is felt that the emergency or health services are so stretched that the normal services afforded to someone who gets into trouble with their boat in the harbour or while swimming or tramping are not able to be relied upon, then that message can be made clear. At this moment, with less than 20 hospital beds occupied by coronavirus patients and 5 ICUs, we are clearly not at that point. Every single day, there are people in the remotest parts of the country who make the decision for themselves that they are going to swim or hunt or surf in places that are far from those services. They are adults. They can make those decisions. So can we all. If social distancing is to be maintained in addition to the usual sensible undertakings made by a Kiwi enjoying their home, then let's make that clear. It could be so simple to have an official government channel simply say that due to the overwhelming demand on the emergency services, health services, and our police force at this time, then please be aware that we cannot assure you of the usual support during these activities. Jumping straight away to a one-size-fits-all dictate dilutes the respect for authority and, in any case, the people that the new anti-swim, tramp, surf, hunt, fish were probably designed to address will ignore them anyway. They always do. We rely on our leaders, especially in times like this, to preserve our way of life and to treat us like the responsible community, loving adults that we are. The worst of this virus will be absolute for the group of people who are unable to fend it away and lose their life. For the overwhelming majority of the population of this country, the worst of this virus will be for the next 2 generations as we try to recover something of what we have lost in so short a time. To some degree, the loss and cost of our health and to our economy is inevitable. The loss of our freedom and the way of living should not be inevitable and should be protected vigorously and with great passion. Let us ensure in the coming days that we do not lose the thing that is most precious to all New Zealanders, those alive today and those in the generations to come, our way of life.